everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Nature Connects, TNC in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and other partners from New England and around the world. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so we thought this was perfectly suited for this month. I'm your host, Trenni Casey. I am a sports anchor and a reporter for NBC Sports Boston and NBC 10. I'm also a trustee on the TNC Massachusetts board and a mental health and nature advocate. We have a really wonderful program for you guys today. We're going to be joined by Dr. John Ratey as we take a look at how nature plays actually a really important role in our emotional well-being. But before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a little bit about our very impressive guest today. John Ratey is an associate clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and an internationally recognized expert in neuropsychiatry. He has published over 60 peer-reviewed articles and 12 books published in 20 languages, which include, in case you want to purchase them, Go Wild, Spark, the revolutionary new science of exercise and the brain, and the groundbreaking Driven to Distraction series. He is one of the world's foremost authorities on the brain fitness connection. Obviously, questions will pop up for Dr. Ratey. So when they do, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That is different from the web chat, which I realized today. Thanks so much again, everyone, for joining us. John, I'm going to pass it on to you so we can get this going.
Here we go. Let's hope I can do this. Okay, let's see, share my screen. Here we go. Well, I'm glad to be with you all. I hope you can hear me. I'll just begin, assuming that you can. It's particularly apt for me to be here today because I just returned from Hawaii, where we were for 6 months. In the midst of beautiful sunshine, but also in the midst of nature. And we go there for that reason. But I'm a big advocate of being in nature, doing things in nature, appreciating nature. And we all should, and it makes us feel so much better. The business about nature and how it affects us starts in a way to understand it is defined by E.O. Wilson, who has given us a lot of insight into ourselves and our world. And he described an innate emotional affiliation with other organisms. Nature is important to each person, even at a very unconscious level. It is encoded in our genes. Our love for nature evolved as we did, part of who we are, and it gives us a sense of well-being wrapped up in these traits. When we were in nature, we were at home. This is the way I felt in Hawaii. We had a lanai, which is a sort of an area that's actually in the trees, and there. Not only seeing the trees, but hearing the birds and getting to know the birds. We love biological things. We feel a part of things. When we take a walk in nature, we feel like we're amongst friends. And heeding that attraction ensures our well-being. This is a problem for people who are raised in the vertical cities where they don't really have nature and they need to they have a nature deficit disorder, which I'll touch on. It's an intimate emotional affiliation of ourselves with other living creatures, plants, animals, trees, and various areas that have these living creatures that we become part of. And in Hawaii, I became very interested in the birds and the bird sounds, and it's very appropriate today. There's an article in the Washington Post, which I refer you to, why birds and their songs are good for mental health. Research shows that even listening to the recordings of bird songs can alleviate negative emotions. They seem to be a specific source of healing benefits, and they're sort of a call to nature, and provides us a way to connect with nature. I put in my slide 2 clicks, one for the Washington Post article today, and I really refer you to it, and not only about bird songs, but if you follow it through and click on the various clicks, you will be taken to other articles and other websites about the benefits of nature, not just bird songs, but nature in general. And we know that this is cross species. It's not just for us. But they did a study looking at areas of note around the world where there are panoramas of views of nature. And what they found was not only did humans congregate there, but so did other animals by looking at their leavings and other evidence, as well as then pictures showing that this is where the elks or the deer or the foxes congregate. Being in nature helps us feel fit. We feel like we're part of things. Richard Louv in the 2004 wrote a bunch of books on the nature deficit disorder, much like our attention deficit disorder, but nature deficit disorder. We don't have enough of it, or if we don't, we are feeling ill or feeling unwell. We know that being outdoors exposes us to all kinds of stuff, full range of microbes that help us get our microbiome into a better shape. It helps us be better with our immune system, helps us fight disease, and helps guide our cognition as well as our emotional world. Outside, we are also exposed to a full spectrum of light, which helps us boost our vitamin D and also helps our mood, that we need natural light in various spectrums to feel good. Certainly those of us in the northern climes realize this long about November, and I'm told now it's probably in late December, early January, when it begins to get really dark and gloomy. The gloom really used to throw me for the many years I was in my in Boston, in Cambridge, and would need a bright light, or would need to get out into the light. Now we began to learn about this really in a scientific sort of way. It started by a number of people, but one was Roger Ulrich from the University of Michigan, when he noticed that he was driving to work through a tree-lined route, which was a bit longer than the route that would have taken him more point to point, more practical. But he liked to go that way. And then he found that other people were doing the same thing, taking a little longer route because it was tree-lined, it was more bucolic. And we had learned that being in nature helps our brain be more in a state of equilibrium. We have a better EEG, we have more alpha waves. And this led to research over the globe that viewing nature really changed our body and our brains. We no longer put out as much cortisol or stress hormone as we had before. A number of studies show that, looking at even scenes that induce mental fatigue if we were looking at scenes of cities or city streets versus those looking at nature scenes. This changed the amount of cortisol we put out, but also changed our EEG, changed our whole feeling about who we are and how we fit in the world. It's expanded to work in the hospitals. A very poignant study showed that 160 heart surgery patients, who most of them having early cardiac surgery, which in the cardiac care unit is generally, there are no windows, no pictures, but they began to have put pictures up on the wall of in the person's cubicle of nature scenes, outdoor scenes. And this led to a study showing that there was people who had this mere picture that reduced pain medicine, lowered cholesterol, boosts their immune system, and they got out early. It hastened their healing. Also, we know this happens in the classroom. If the two pictures here of one of a classroom with a look on the outdoors versus that didn't have that, the students in either testing shows that those with the view of nature improve their academic performance on standardized tests, improve their mood as well as their cognition. And this led to led to a big change in the way we set up hospitals, making it very clear that we wanted views of nature as much as we could. So there were more windows in the rooms, and resulting in less medication and less time spent on the hospital, and a variety of different studies, not just cardiac surgery, but a big one on gallbladder extraction early on. Very poignant. If you had the more windows you had, the less time you spent in the hospital in recovery. And then even more important is getting outside, not just looking at nature scenes. A friend of mine, Andrew Heberman, now a famous Stanford neuroscientist who has this amazing podcast on the neuroscience of wellness. Very, very good information, but he recommends on a sunny morning to get outside, even for 5 or 10 minutes, that it will change your mood. And he brings to bear all the evidence that is out there in terms of our EEG changes or hormone changes, and it leads to an improvement in sleep, improvement in our movement throughout the day, also improves our choices for food, and it makes us more seeking connection, because we hit an area of the brain that really is desiring us to connect to others. So a dose of nature changes your body chemistry for the better. Breathing in oxygen raises our serotonin levels, and that's a big neurotransmitter in making us feel better, making us feel less depressed, more positive, more motivated. All kinds of studies show that even walking for 90 minutes in a natural area, as opposed to others who walked in a high traffic area in an urban setting, showed decreased activity of the brain in areas associated with depression. Another study looked at the tradition of forest bathing, or Shinrin Yoku, a Japanese practice of sending people out into the forest to have what's called forest bathing. They bathe themselves with the environment, with the trees, with the smells, with the birds singing. And they used it often for their very closeted and very high stress employees, to send them out to the forest for a forest bathing trip. Also in South Korea, they've done the similar kind of thing, and did the studies to show that it improved, even having a window and have seen out onto more bucolic versus another building next to them, that it led to increased sleep. They slept better, more soundly. And one of the things that I've written a lot about is how exercise affects the brain and how important exercise outside is. Just moving in outside has the benefits on our brain that are squared. That is much more of an effect than if you're doing it on a treadmill in a gym. So get outside and do those kind of walks that in nature. It lowers our heart rate, boosts our immune response, strengthens immunity, lifts our mood, improves sleep, boosts attention, and sparks creativity. Very important to get out there and move in nature. Many studies have been done looking at how this reduces cortisol. Just a stroll in the forest versus in the city. The forest walkers hit the anti-anxiety jackpot. They were less anxious, then they showed a 16% decrease in their stress hormone, cortisol. Also, the South Koreans have done a lot of work, and they advocate the same kind of thing, these benefits of getting outside in the forest and away from Seoul or some of the other big centers where it's all about go, 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 and it's all about inside, getting them outside. It hits and activates parts of the brain that are involved with altruism and empathy, the anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula, which when they're turned on, make us seek others for connection, which is we call vitamin C, which is really a big part of our wellness package. When we're in nature, we feel we are fit, we are home. Repeated testing show that those who viewed nature scenes improved accuracy and target, faster reaction time, and better memory. So and even looking at nature does the same kind of thing. So plants, having a plant in the office, we knew that was a big deal in the 90s. People were heralding it and putting plants everywhere because it had an effect on mood, had an effect on attention, helps clean the air, all the reasons why we have plants around us, but it's nature that we're craving. An interesting study out of Harvard showed that if you're not a morning person, but you get up and you look at flowers, it raises your alertness and improves your mood for the rest of the day. In other words, it's a way to deal with the lagging sleep needs. Going for a walk improves mental performance, improves the mood, improves cognition, makes us smarter by just getting outside and treating our nature deficit disorder. 4 days of immersion in nature and disconnect from multimedia, which is a huge thing these days, increases performance and creativity and problem solving by a full 50% in a group of hikers that were not used to hiking, but you put them out there in nature and their brains get better. their moods get better, their motivation to do things get better. And so that it's really incumbent, I think, upon all of us to share this information with our friends and loved ones and get them moving out in nature. And so it comes at a time in Mental Health Awareness Week or month, as well as interdigitating with our appreciation of nature and how much it can do for us. So with that, we'll turn it over for questions.
Dr. Ratey, thank you. We did get a couple of questions and I jotted down a few of my own as well. If you still have questions, please, after listening to the entire presentation or something Dr. Ratey says and one of the answers sparks something, please don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A box. We're happy to answer whatever questions you might have. I'm going to start with it's more of a comment from Jeff, but I found it really interesting because it identifies with the first question I wrote down when you were talking about those of us who live in cities are like sort of nature deficient and sometimes we're almost averse to nature because we're not surrounded by it. And he is he says he wished more people understood the need for nature and the importance of nature. He's a landscape architect, and he said that our budget is always the first to be cut by clients or condensed or an afterthought or seen as a luxury. He says nature heals. Studies show how people in hospitals have fewer complications, less pain, less medication, heal faster, and are released faster when they look at a green space versus blank walls, parking lots. He talks about them shutting down open spaces and parks during COVID and how that had a negative effect, which is perfect because I had actually written down when you were talking right at the start, Dr. Ratey, I asked about the importance of cities and having better urban planning and incorporating green spaces. And I mean, not everyone can get maybe to the suburbs every day or up to New Hampshire or Maine or Vermont, Connecticut and go hiking. But are there still benefits of walking along the Charles River or even standing with your dog in a green open space in the morning and just experiencing that? Like, can you get the same benefits from urban green space as you can from the forest and more true nature?
Oh, certainly. That's why there's such a natural draw to have wherever you're working or living on green space area, whether it's a golf course even, or the Charles River, as you say, or a park. This is what we're driven to because there's a natural affiliation. That's why real estate is more expensive in those areas where you have a clear vision of the greenery of the outside, because we feel better. We all feel better because of it. We feel more attuned to life because, and that's why I was so delighted to read the bird article, because the birds sort of call you to nature, if you will. They sort of remind you that there's nature out there, that you're a part of it. And by walking your dog, I mean, my writing partner Ned Hallowell says that dog is really God spelled backwards, and it makes sense that dogs give us so much to walk them, to play with them outside, but certainly their connection. But having to walk them makes us healthier. Because we begin to move, and moving in nature is such a brilliant way to make our brains and our bodies the best that they can be. It's something that we have data for. We know how it works. We know the changes that it makes in our brain and the neurotransmitters. I didn't go into them, but you know, and the neurohormones, we know about cortisol, but there's all kinds of changes that occur when we're in nature.
Well, question kind of along the same lines of urban versus suburban or rural nature. Daniela asks, how similar are various natural environments and their effects? E.g., is there something special about forests compared to, for instance, wetlands, pastures? And is there research and is this known if there's a difference of the benefits?
I, I don't know, but I imagine there is a difference, but it probably is slight. In other words, I think the if you're walking in a wetland area versus that in a forest or a tree-lined area, you're going to have different microbes in both that may have an impact on your health. And you know, we do have studies showing that if you're in various nature situations, your microbiomes are an internal group of bacteria and microbes that we carry around with us and are so important for our immune system and our feeling states and our motivation and our thinking and our memory. All these things are impacted by nature and impacts our internal what's called the second brain, the microbiome, that we need this connection that then helps us really be better, do better, feel better.
Well, both Lillian and Linda have similar questions. They would like to know, do you get the same benefits? And I know you talked about the cognitive benefits of even just looking at a screen or a photo or a picture or video of nature, but do you get the same health benefits when you're looking at something on a screen or pictures or photos you do actually being in nature?
No, but it does help, but it's not nearly the impact of being, you know, immersed in nature, being out there, being involved in nature. We need the sort of whole panorama, the whole immersion into the nature space to get the most benefits. There's certainly watching a nature film, watching Attenborough's description of the world and showing about all the animals, and I mean that's a delight, but it's not the same as going on a safari, you know. I mean, and doing it yourself and walking and seeing all the animals and whatnot. Listening to birds has an incredible reduction in anxiety and paranoia in everyone in the studies shown. But it's not the same as if you're out there where I was, for instance, and it was really poignant to me. I fell in love with the birds because I had a whole group of birds that would come to our palm trees every night at dusk and sleep there. And I was trying to photograph them and all this. I mean, they'd actually sleep. There were about 40 birds that would all come at about 6:15 when it started, and then 6:45 when we left, because the light changes were different. But it was amazing, and I had a group of neighbors come over to witness it, and everybody wanted to see the birds come in and go to sleep and go into their, it wasn't nests, but it was just into the trees, into the various fronds to take a break, to go to sleep. And it was really amazing, and everybody sort of felt enlivened. They felt good. Now, why should we feel good about that? But we felt good because it changed. It's what we're connected to, and feeling connection is so important. And one of the hormones that nature and exercise, but nature as well, raises is oxytocin. And oxytocin is our natural bonding hormone, or love hormone. It makes us more wanting connection, and it actually makes us more liable, makes us more connectable. People want to be more connected to us because of it. So by raising that, we are more altruistic and more connected human beings, and that has incredible health benefits throughout life, but not just mental health, but in general, our immune system and all.
Well, one of the attendees would like to know, what is the minimum amount of time people should try to be outside every day?
That's the same question I get with exercise. What's the minimum? What is the least amount of exercise I have to do? And the answer is I don't know. I don't think the minimum, and in terms of what benefit you're looking for. I mean, some of these people were, the people in Japan and Korea who go out for forest bathing are out there for days, a few days out in the forest. But you can do it, they do it for an afternoon as well. And they feel better. They feel, and their cortisol drops. But the more you do it, the more you're changing things for the long term. So I don't have an answer. I mean, it's great. Instead of a coffee break, if you live near a green space, to take a nature break would be something, to get out there and walk around the park, or in now many new buildings, like your landscape architect, many new buildings have green spaces either affixed to them or right in the midst of their building.
And I would think having your coffee outside in nature, then you get the best of both worlds, right?
Absolutely.
I want to take anyone's coffee away. Evan
Yeah.
would like to know, and I'm assuming based on all of the research and the data that proves nature is so good at healing people, who, especially those who are hospitalized and are sick, he wants to know why hospitals aren't using more greenery and recovery outside.
They are. I mean, they are from where it was before the 70s. I can tell you the hospital buildings and architects are working in more windows. Hospitals used to be much like our old schools, and mental hospitals used to be, the less windows, the better, because it lowered the heating costs and all that. But it's now that they really are focusing much more on getting the people back, either pictures in the room, even as I mentioned, or more windows in the room, and to improve the healing going on. And yes, I mean, it's in the fancier places, you're going to see more nature, on the Gold Coast, in these hospitals, you're going to see plants and more windows. Whereas then where you have a whole bevy of people all in one room, you're not going to see that. And that depends, certainly, that's an inequity of nature in the hospitals. Yeah, we should be.
Oh, please finish, sorry.
Pardon?
Oh, I said I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Barbara would like to know if you could review the findings about ADHD in children being affected by time in nature, and is there sound science to lead doctors to prescribe nature rather than medication?
I don't know, rather than, this is always, people want one thing to do, either nature or medication, either exercise or medication. Every person, every child, every patient is different. So, and it's going to affect people differently. And medication, yes, nature can be one of the many things that helps with attention and attention deficit, as does exercise. A very powerful improvement in attention and frontal cortex and all the stuff that we write about. And yes, it is important, but it may not be the only thing. It may not be enough. And in fact, in people in the urban areas where there's not a lot of nature, it's hard to do, to get a steady diet of nature. And would it be better for classes to be held outside by teachers to take their kids around just walking around the school, walking in the schoolyard, which is outside? I mean, and when we started, many of the wonderful teachers that we met were already doing that. We're getting their kids outside because they knew that this helped calm them down, and it wasn't just a matter of tiring them out. It turned their brains on, because they were moving, but also because they were outside.
Okay, Susan wants to know, do you have any suggestions to help manage the negative mental health impacts of the incredibly bad, sad, and results of climate change, loss of species and habitat? This impacts my mood on a daily basis and is a constant struggle to stay optimistic. And I suppose if you're out in nature, you're sort of confronted with it, right? The changes in nature due to climate change.
Right. Individually, I think that's the ticket, is to make sure you get to New Hampshire, or make sure Western Mass, or close by. You can go to the Blue Hills, for God's sakes, in Boston. You don't have to travel. There's plenty of areas that you can go and immerse yourself in nature. And with climate change, it's where we're at. It is what it is, and we have to deal with it. But on an individual basis, one can deal with it by not cheating yourself out of nature, and cheating yourself out of movement, cheating yourself out of connecting with what's left. Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we could reverse that, and we could change the world. But in lieu of that, you have to do what you can do.
Well, Dan's question is following on an earlier question, and he asks, has there been research into any benefits from the use of virtual reality or similar immersive technology to mimic a visit to nature? And I wonder how that also maybe corresponds with someone who's in a hospital and is maybe too sick to go outside, like they have to stay inside, or tying it back to the question about climate change. The other day, our skies here were cloudy because of residual smoke from forest fires. So if you're asthmatic, it may not have been a great day to be outside. So are there other alternatives that, as these things pop up, you can still get the benefits of nature?
Look, my bet would be that it is really beneficial. My bet would be to put on those ocular goggles and be immersed in nature is beneficial and has a big effect. It may be even bigger than being outside. I don't know. I'm not aware of the literature, but it only makes sense that it would be some way of dealing with the lack of green space, the lack of nature, and especially in the vertical communities in China, and not just China, but everywhere that we have these, people live packed on top of one another, and without having the natural space that we all crave and need. So I would bet that that's a good and a developing way of improving our moods, improving our attention and our memory.
Gary would like to know more about, he asks that you tell us about the microbes present in air samples taken in various places.
Yeah, well, and it's going to vary from pillar to post where you get the various microbes and microorganisms and bits of proteins, bits of various smells and all, which I think really has a different kind of beneficial effect on immediately, but also long term. and long term, it's going to affect our the microbiome, our inner brain, if you will, something that can really change based on the environment, and as well as over time, if you live in nature, you're going to have your whole stress responsive system is going to be tuned down. So you're not going to ramp up into the sympathetic nervous system and into the go action, getting ready to react or to fight or flight or freeze. It's going to take more poignant of a more hideous stressor, and we don't need more hideous stressors. Mentioning climate change and the way the world has changed. Oh my God, it's enough stressors. We need to glory in what we have, and that's not only with nature but with each other. And that's why the benefits of moving in space in nature with people that you know or you love. My God, there is a recipe for mental health, cognitive health, physical health.
Kendra would like to ask you to speak more about nature deficit disorder. How do we know if we are in a deficit, and what are the most effective methods for improving this deficit?
Yeah, the nature deficit, how we know is that we're overly tense, we're more anxious, we're less flexible. That's a big measure, by the way, flexibility in general, both intellectually, cognitively, as well as emotionally, being able to be in various situations that you can adapt to. That in fact is one of the highest orders of being human and being well, is being able to adapt to different situations without going into multiple panics or raising your blood pressure over much, or raising your stress hormone, that you're able to deal, you're able to adapt as a person, as a being. And believe, and we know that, I mean, the best way of doing that is to have a partner, is to be connected to another human, but a dog will do,
Dogs really are the best. Carolyn would like to know, do nature sounds in general calm you, or do they have to be bird sounds?
Oh, no. The birds are specific, they're the sort of the highlight of nature, right? But where we live in Hawaii, we're 2 or 3 blocks away from the Honolulu Zoo. So not only do I have the birds, but some days I have the monkeys. I can hear them waking up. And once I heard a lion roar. I mean, these are, and it's similar in so many ways. The sounds of the birds are just so beautiful, but the sound of the wind through the trees is beautiful as well. And we are connected to that. We feel we're at home, because the point is that we have, our genes evolved, our beings evolved over time, and most of that time was spent in nature. It's only 10,000 years where we've had farming, and we've had we weren't moving all the time. And when we were moving all the time back then, we were moving into different nature spaces, because we were foraging for food or going for another area to, kill the animals, to feed us. It's not very long ago, and our genes have not evolved very much in those 10,000 years. So we have hardwired this affiliation for nature.
Well, it's a perfect segue into the next question from Joshua. He asks, has there been any research done on the continuous effect of nature experience? E.g., do people who live in a forest have less markers for depression than those who live in cities, or could it largely be through a change in environment?
No, it's really the former. The living there, being your immune system's better. We know that, people that even growing up on a farm, we have less problems with autoimmune issues. We have less asthma. There's less asthma in the farms in Arkansas than in kids than there is in the in New York City. There less numbers of kids coming up with asthma because they're out there in nature more. And that's just one easy example.
Okay, we have a next question. It's from Elizabeth, and she says it's similar to the question about the hospitals. As mentioned, there are often photos of nature in dentist and doctors' offices. Are there benefits of nature being part of mainstream medical curriculum?
Yes, but mainstream medical curriculum, how do you change that? It's very interesting, even any of the wellness issues, and biophilia is a well-known wellness need that we have to affiliate ourselves with the natural world. Well, it's hard to get that into a curriculum, into a medical curriculum, when everybody is so worried about all the stuff we can measure and do. Even with exercise, which there's no question of the benefits of exercise, physically, emotionally, cognitively, socially, just no question about it. And healing issues, not just preventative, but the healing benefits of exercise. But you hardly hear about it in the medical curriculum. And it's just something that really, and what freaks people out is the whole issue of food. In medicine, we never learned anything about diet or food in terms of what we needed to know and prescribe or change. A little bit about too much carbohydrate way back, and when I was in medical school, I'm sure that's much more these days. But we have an information deficit disorder in our medical curriculum for wellness. Anything with wellness is just like, it's assumed that's okay. It's assumed that everybody will know that, or, but it's not something that you can put as many numbers on as you can with the glucose level in the blood. We know what's going on there.
Kind of along the same lines, Maggie would like to know what can be done to make workplaces require windows, especially big offices with cubicles and such, or doctors' offices that are like tiny little holes. Would this start with local government officials and writing to our state representatives?
Yeah, no, it's just I don't know what can be done. General awareness says we should know this. And certainly with the schools, certainly with the hospitals, this is something that really needs to, make sure that as we're constructing these things, that we pay attention to the outside. We want to bring the outside in more. I don't. Yes, if you're talking about an effort, then that thinks it becomes political. It becomes a question of the laws to help us manage and monitor these things.
I know, Tina, do we have enough time for more questions, or I don't want to go over anyone's time. I know it's 12:55.
Yeah, I think that we should probably just do one more question.
One more question? Okay. Let's see here. Gary would like to know, is there any evidence that spending time in a forest will lower your blood pressure?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was one of the first things that came out of Sherman Yoku when they began to look at these overstressed workers in Japan, in Tokyo. And when they took them out into the forest, they saw a drop in all those sympathetic nervous system measures, including blood pressure and pulse, as well as cortisol level, as well as better sleep. So there certainly is evidence for that, certainly. So, and with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening to me, and I appreciated your questions, and it was nice to have an interchange, a dialogue, a connection. So thank you.
Next time we can do it in a park, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Tina, I don't know if we have anything else. I know we're thrilled to have everyone here. We have webinars quite frequently. I believe I need to pull up my little script here, but I think we have them about once a month with the Nature Conservancy about all different types of issues affecting nature and conservation. And so just be on the lookout in your inbox for them and get outside. It's going to be a beautiful weekend. Saturday is going to be a little rainy, but other than that, it is a perfect time to be outside.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who tuned in for your support of the Nature Conservancy. Your support is what makes all of this work possible. We will be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with a link to a recording of this webinar. If you're enjoying our webinars, please be sure to share them with your friends and colleagues. You can follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with our work and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. As always, you can register for future webinars at nature.org/MA-webinars. During our next webinar on May 25th, our Director of Policy and Partnerships, Steve Long, will host Jonathan Guzman, External Affairs Manager of Groundwork Lawrence, for a discussion on funding equitable solutions to address climate change. Please join us. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon.